You've been told that healing means moving on, that it means forgetting what hurt you, leaving the past behind, becoming someone who no longer feels the weight of old wounds. But that's not healing, that's erasure. And erasure doesn't free you. It fragments you. Real healing isn't about forgetting. It's about embracing what hurt. It's about turning toward the pain you've been running from and discovering that it was never your enemy. It was your teacher. This video isn't about quick fixes or feel-good philosophies. It's about the raw, uncomfortable, transformative journey from suffering to wisdom. If you've ever felt like you're carrying something too heavy to name, if you've ever wondered why the same pain keeps showing up in different forms, or if you're tired of pretending you're fine when you're not, this is for you. Because what you're about to hear might challenge everything you thought healing was supposed to look like. And that's exactly where the truth begins. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It lives beneath the surface, quiet as fog over water, shaping everything you do without ever announcing itself. You felt it, that heaviness in your chest when you're alone, that restlessness that won't let you sit still, that voice whispering you're not enough even when no one else is speaking. Eastern philosophy calls this the beginning of self-awareness, the moment you notice the shadow before you see the light. It's not dramatic. It's not a breakdown. It's subtler than that, a recognition that something within you has been hurting for longer than you've been willing to admit. And the strange thing? Most people spend their entire lives running from this exact moment. The mind is brilliant at building walls. It creates distractions, ambitions, relationships, addictions, anything to avoid feeling what's underneath. You scroll, you work, you keep yourself so busy that silence becomes unbearable. But the wound doesn't disappear just because you refuse to look at it. In Taoism, they speak of wu-wei, effortless flow, but before you can flow, you must first stop resisting what is. The emotional pain you carry isn't asking for permission to exist. It already does. It breathes in the spaces between your thoughts, in the moments when your guard drops, in the dreams you can't quite remember. This is where the psychology of pain meets spiritual transformation. The understanding that suffering isn't the enemy, it's the teacher you've been avoiding. Think about the last time you felt truly at peace. Not distracted, not numb, truly still. For most people, that moment is rare or entirely absent. Why? Because inner stillness forces you to confront what you've buried. Trauma healing doesn't begin with answers. It begins with acknowledgement. You can't heal what you won't name. Zen philosophy teaches that enlightenment isn't found by escaping the world, it's found by seeing it clearly. And seeing clearly means looking at your own reflection without flinching. The wound that breathes in silence is calling you, not to destroy you, but to free you. But first, you have to stop pretending it isn't there. Let's get practical for a second. You know that feeling when someone asks, "How are you?" and you automatically say, "I'm fine," even though you're not? That's the wound speaking and being silenced in real time. Or when you lie in bed at night replaying conversations, wondering why you said what you said, why you feel anxious for no reason you can name. That's not weakness. That's your psyche trying to show you something. In Buddhism, this is called Dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness of life, not because life is inherently bad, but because we're constantly resisting what's real. The mind-body connection is undeniable. Your body knows the truth even when your mind denies it. Tension in your shoulders, a knot in your stomach, insomnia. These aren't random, they're messages. And here's where it gets interesting. Recognizing the wound doesn't mean you suddenly know how to fix it. It just means you finally stopped pretending it isn't bleeding. Non-attachment in Eastern philosophy isn't about not caring. It's about observing without clinging, without forcing. You can't think your way out of emotional pain. You can only feel your way through it. Shadow work begins here, in this uncomfortable space where you acknowledge that something hurts and you don't yet know why. The ego wants answers. The soul wants honesty. And honesty, at first, feels like vulnerability. But vulnerability isn't collapse. It's the first breath after holding your breath for years. The wound is breathing. The question is, are you willing to breathe with it? The moment you recognize the wound, something inside you panics. It's instinctive, like pulling your hand away from fire before you even register the heat. The ego, that part of you built to protect your identity, immediately goes to work. It says, "This isn't real. You're overthinking. You're fine." It offers you 1,000 distractions, a million reasons to look away. Maybe you throw yourself into work, convincing yourself that productivity equals healing. Maybe you start a new relationship, hoping someone else can fill the emptiness you refuse to face. Or maybe you numb out entirely binge-watching, drinking, scrolling until your eyes blur. This is resistance in its purest form. And here's the paradox. The harder you try to erase the pain, the louder it becomes. Buddhism speaks of samsara, the cycle of suffering we trap ourselves in by clinging to what we think will save us. The ego believes that if it can just control the narrative, manage the image, keep everything together, then the pain will dissolve on its own. But suffering and awakening don't work that way. The more you avoid, the more you feed the wound. Think about it. Have you ever tried not to think about something? The second you tell yourself, "Don't think about that," it's all you can think about. The ego's strategy is fundamentally flawed. It tries to solve emotional pain with logic, to fix what's broken by pretending it was never whole. This is where ego dissolution begins to whisper at the edges of your awareness, though you're not ready to hear it yet. Let's be real for a moment. You've probably done this before. Maybe you convinced yourself that changing your job would fix everything, only to find the same emptiness in the new role. Or you ended a relationship thinking the person was the problem, only to repeat the same patterns with someone new. That's not coincidence. That's the ego projecting outward what needs to be resolved inward. In Jungian psychology, this is called shadow projection. We blame the world for what we refuse to see in ourselves. The ego doesn't want you to look at your trauma because looking means admitting it exists. And admitting it exists means accepting that you're not who you thought you were. That terrifies the ego more than anything. Here's where mindfulness enters the picture, though not in the Instagram quote way you might expect. True mindfulness isn't about lighting candles and feeling peaceful. It's about witnessing your own resistance without judgment. Sit quietly for 5 minutes and watch what your mind does. It'll race. It'll manufacture problems. It'll remind you of things you need to do. Why? Because stillness threatens the ego's control. The mind-body connection betrays you here. Your heart might race, your palms might sweat, your chest might tighten, all because you're doing nothing. That's how desperately the ego wants to avoid what actually needs to be seen. Meditation and suffering aren't opposites. They're dance partners. You can't meditate your way around pain. You can only meditate your way into it. And the ego is clever. It'll dress up avoidance as self-care. It'll tell you that you're not ready to face this, that you need more time, more resources, more clarity. But Taoism teaches us about impermanence. Nothing waits for permission. The wound doesn't care if you're ready. It's already here, breathing, waiting. Wu Wei isn't about forcing. It's about allowing, but the ego interprets allowing as weakness, as giving up, as losing. So it fights. It builds higher walls, creates louder noise, spins faster stories. And somewhere beneath all that desperate activity, the part of you that knows the truth grows quieter. Not because it's gone, but because it's learning that the ego will eventually exhaust itself. The question isn't if the walls will fall. The question is, how much more will you sacrifice before you stop defending them? Pain is patient. It doesn't need to be loud to be persistent. You ignore it, and it waits. You distract yourself, and it lingers. You bury it under layers of achievement, relationships, or philosophies, and still it finds a way back. Not because it wants to punish you, but because it carries something you need to learn. Eastern philosophy understands this deeply. Suffering isn't random, and it isn't cruel. It's cyclical. In Buddhism, this is the nature of karma and rebirth, not in some mystical afterlife sense, but in the daily repetition of unresolved patterns. The same argument with your partner, the same anxiety before a big decision, the same feeling of not being enough no matter what you accomplish. The pain returns because you haven't yet stopped long enough to ask it what it's trying to say. Shadow work is where most people falter. It's one thing to recognize pain exists. It's another to sit across from it like an old friend and listen. Carl Jung called the shadow the person you'd rather not be, the parts of yourself you've disowned, rejected, or hidden away. But here's the twist. Those rejected parts don't disappear. They show up in your triggers, your projections, your inexplicable reactions to seemingly small things. Someone criticizes you, and you spiral for days. Someone ignores your message, and you convince yourself you're unlovable. These aren't overreactions, they're echoes. The pain is teaching you where the wound still lives, where you've never truly healed. And until you acknowledge it, really acknowledge it, not just intellectually, but viscerally, it'll keep coming back. Think about this practically. Let's say you grew up feeling invisible. Maybe your parents were too busy, too distracted, too overwhelmed. You learned early that your needs didn't matter as much as keeping the peace. Fast forward to adulthood. You struggle to speak up at work. You overextend yourself to please others, and you resent people for not noticing what you never told them you needed. That's the pain returning as a teacher. It's not asking you to blame your parents or wallow in victimhood. It's asking you to see the pattern. Trauma healing doesn't happen by understanding the past. It happens by recognizing how the past is still writing your present. The teacher isn't in the memory. It's in the moment you realize you're still living from that wound. Zen philosophy offers a powerful image here, the mirror. A mirror doesn't judge what it reflects, it simply shows what is. The pain returning is your mirror. It reflects the parts of you that are still fragmented, still unintegrated, still crying out for attention. But most people smash the mirror instead of looking at the reflection. They blame others, change circumstances, or numb out. And the pain? It just finds another mirror. Detachment, in the Zen sense, doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop resisting. You let the pain show you its lesson without clinging to the story of why it shouldn't be there. This is where spiritual transformation begins to crack open the shell of who you thought you were. And here's the raw truth. The pain will escalate if you keep ignoring it. What starts as a whisper becomes a shout. What begins as mild anxiety turns into full-blown panic attacks. What feels like occasional sadness deepens into persistent emptiness. This isn't punishment, it's proportion. The louder you need the lesson to be, the louder the pain becomes. In Taoism, There's a concept called returning to the root, the idea that life always brings you back to what's unresolved until you resolve it. You can try to outrun it, outsmart it, or outbusy it, but eventually you'll find yourself face to face with the same lesson in a different form, asking the same question you've been avoiding. Are you ready to listen now? Because the teacher doesn't leave until the student finally sits down. There comes a moment when you can't hold it together anymore. Not because you're weak, but because you've been holding too much for too long. The walls you built, the masks you wore, the stories you told yourself about who you are, they all crack at once. This is the collapse. And it doesn't feel like liberation at first, it feels like failure. Like everything you worked for is crumbling. Like you've lost control of the narrative you spent years perfecting. But here's what most people don't understand. The collapse isn't the end of you. It's the end of the false you. Ego dissolution doesn't happen gently. It happens when the structure you built to protect yourself becomes too heavy to carry. And in that breaking, something honest finally has room to breathe. Buddhism calls this hitting rock bottom before enlightenment through pain can begin. It's not poetic when you're in it. It's terrifying. Maybe it's a panic attack that won't stop. Maybe it's lying on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., sobbing for reasons you can't name. Maybe it's the moment you realize you don't even recognize yourself anymore. The mind-body connection screams here. Your body forces what your mind refused. Exhaustion, illness, breakdown. This is impermanence showing you that nothing you cling to can last forever, not your image, not your control, not even your suffering. The collapse strips you down to what's real. And what's real is terrifying because it's raw, unfiltered, and completely outside the ego's grasp. Let's get specific. You know those people who seem to have everything together until suddenly they don't? The high achiever who burns out. The strong friend who finally admits they're drowning. The person who seemed fine until they weren't. That's not randomness. That's accumulation. Every time they ignored the pain, every time they pushed through without processing, every time they chose productivity over presence, it all stacked up. The collapse is what happens when the body says enough. This is where trauma healing becomes unavoidable. You can't think your way out of this one. You can't hustle your way through. The only way is down into the mess, into the wound, into everything you've been running from. And the invitation isn't to fix it, it's to feel it. In Taoism, there's wisdom in yielding. The river doesn't fight the rocks, it flows around them, through them, over them. But the ego doesn't know how to yield. It only knows how to resist. So when the collapse comes, the ego interprets it as death. And in a way, it is. Not the death of you, but the death of who you pretended to be. Shadow work reaches its peak here in the darkest hour, where you're forced to confront everything you buried. The anger you swallowed, the grief you postponed, the shame you carried in silence. This is samsara and nirvana colliding, the cycle of suffering meeting the possibility of freedom. But freedom doesn't come from escaping the collapse, it comes from surrendering to it. And here's the paradox that changes everything. The collapse is the invitation, not to destruction, but to reality. All those layers you built to protect yourself were also the layers keeping you from yourself. The anxiety, the depression, the emptiness, they weren't signs that something was wrong with you. They were signs that something false was finally breaking. Wu Wei teaches us that sometimes the most powerful action is non-action, letting things fall apart without rushing to rebuild them the same way. The collapse asks you a question you've never truly answered. Who are you when you're not performing, not achieving, not controlling? Who remains when everything else falls away? That question terrifies the ego, but it awakens something deeper, something that's been waiting beneath the noise, beneath the masks, beneath the pain, waiting for you to finally stop running and start listening. After the collapse, there's a strange silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of exhaustion. You fought so hard, resisted so long, that you simply don't have the energy to keep running. And in that unexpected stillness, something shifts. You stop trying to fix it. You stop searching for answers. You just exist. This is the pause. It's not dramatic. It's not a breakthrough moment with violins playing in the background. It's quieter than that. It's the first time you let yourself feel without immediately trying to make the feeling go away. Eastern philosophy calls this the beginning of mindfulness, not as a practice, but as a state of being. You're not meditating to escape suffering. You're present with it. And presence, it turns out, changes everything. The pause is where self-awareness deepens beyond thought. Before, you knew the pain was there intellectually. You could name it, analyze it, explain it. But knowing about pain isn't the same as feeling it. In Zen philosophy, they speak of direct experience, the difference between reading about water and drinking it. When you finally stop resisting, you taste the pain for what it actually is. And here's what most people discover. It's not as catastrophic as the fear of it. The anticipation, the avoidance, the constant vigilance that was heavier than the pain itself. Once you allow yourself to feel, really feel, the grip loosens. Not because the pain disappears, but because you stop making it your enemy. This is where the psychology of pain meets liberation. Suffering decreases the moment you stop fighting it. Let's make this tangible. Imagine you're anxious about something, a conversation you need to have, a decision you need to make. Your usual pattern is to distract yourself, overthink it, rehearse every possible outcome until you're paralyzed. But what if instead you just sat with the anxiety? Not to understand it, not to solve it, just to feel it. Where does it live in your body? Your chest? Your throat? Your stomach? What does it actually feel like? Tight, heavy, electric? When you give yourself permission to pause and feel without resisting, something remarkable happens. The sensation moves. It doesn't stay frozen. Trauma healing occurs not by avoiding the body's response, but by allowing it to complete. The mind-body connection isn't just real, it's the pathway through. Your body has been holding what your mind refused to process. The pause gives it permission to release. This is where Wu Wei becomes lived experience. Effortless flow doesn't mean nothing affects you. It means you stop obstructing what wants to move through you. Think of grief. When someone loses someone they love, there's often this pressure to move on, to be strong, to get back to normal. But grief doesn't work on schedules. It comes in waves. And the people who heal aren't the ones who resist the waves, they're the ones who let themselves be moved by them. They cry when they need to cry. They feel the emptiness without rushing to fill it. They honor the impermanence of everything, including their own pain. Non-attachment here doesn't mean not loving. It means not clinging to how things should be. The pause allows you to meet reality as it is, not as you wish it were. And in that pause, something unexpected emerges, clarity. Not answers, clarity. You begin to see patterns you couldn't see before. You notice how you've been protecting yourself from feeling by staying busy, by people-pleasing, by perfectionism. You recognize the teacher in the pain, the lesson that's been trying to reach you all along. This is spiritual transformation in its most intimate form, not a grand awakening, but a gentle unfolding. Inner stillness isn't the absence of feeling. It's the presence of awareness without resistance. You're not numb. You're not in denial. You're awake. And being awake means feeling everything, the pain, yes, but also the strange peace that comes when you stop fighting yourself. The pause isn't the end of the journey, but it's the moment you realize you don't have to white-knuckle your way through life anymore. Something softer, something wiser is beginning to take root. There's a moment in the healing process when you realize you can't force it. You can't think your way into wholeness. You can't hustle your way to peace. You can't control the timeline of your own transformation. This realization, at first, feels like defeat. The ego wants a strategy, a plan, a guaranteed outcome. But Wu Wei, the Taoist concept of effortless action, asks something radically different. What if healing isn't about doing more, but about interfering less? What if the wound knows how to close on its own, if you just stop picking at it? This isn't passivity. It's a deeper kind of activity, the activity of presence, of witnessing, of allowing what needs to unfold without forcing it into a shape that makes you comfortable. In trauma healing, there's a dangerous trap, trying to heal the right way. You read the books, follow the frameworks, do the therapy exercises, and all of it helps. But somewhere along the way, healing itself becomes another performance, another metric of success or failure. You judge yourself for still feeling sad, for having a bad day, for not progressing fast enough. That's the ego trying to control what can only be surrendered to. Eastern philosophy teaches that the river doesn't try to reach the ocean, it simply flows. Obstacles come, and the water moves around them. It doesn't force, it doesn't resist, it adapts. Wu Wei in healing means you stop treating yourself like a problem to be solved and start treating yourself like a process to be honored. The wound isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. And teachers require patience, not force. Let's bring this into the real world. Think about physical healing for a moment. When you cut your hand, you don't sit there commanding the skin to knit itself back together. You clean the wound, maybe bandage it, and then you let the body do what it knows how to do. Emotional pain works the same way. You can create the conditions for healing therapy, reflection, rest, honest conversations, but you can't force the timeline. Some wounds close quickly, others take years. And the ones that take years aren't worse wounds, they're just deeper, older, more entangled with who you are. Shadow work at this stage isn't about excavating every dark corner of your psyche. It's about noticing what arises without judgment and allowing its space to exist. You witness the anger without becoming it. You feel the sadness without drowning in it. This is mindfulness as medicine, not the Instagram kind, but the lived kind. Buddhism speaks of the middle way, not asceticism, not indulgence, but balance. In healing, this means not forcing yourself to get over it and not wallowing in it either. You feel what's there, and then you let it move. Meditation and suffering teach you this rhythm. Sensation arises, you notice it, and then it passes. Everything is impermanent, even pain. But the ego clings. It clings to the story of the wound, to the identity of being broken, or to the fantasy of being fixed. Wu Wei asks you to release both extremes. You're not broken. You're not fixed. You're alive, and alive means in process. The mind-body connection becomes your compass here. When you're forcing, your body tenses. When you're flowing, your body softens. Listen to that. And here's the part that surprises most people. Witnessing is transformative in itself. You don't have to do anything with what you witness. You don't have to analyze it, fix it, or understand it. Just seeing it, really seeing it, changes its hold on you. This is where self-awareness becomes enlightenment through pain. Not enlightenment as some distant peak you climb, but enlightenment as the simple, radical act of being present with what is. The collapse broke you open. The pause allowed you to feel. And now, Wu Wei invites you to trust the process you can't control. Healing isn't linear. It doesn't follow your schedule. But it is happening quietly, beneath the noise, in ways you won't fully understand until you look back and realize you're not the same person you were when this began. And that person you're becoming, they don't need to be forced into existence. They're already here, waiting for you to stop resisting and start witnessing. Here's the insight that changes everything. The pain was never asking to be eliminated. It was asking to be seen, felt, and integrated into who you are. This is where most healing philosophies get it wrong. They treat pain like an invader, something foreign that needs to be expelled. But Eastern philosophy understands something deeper. Pain isn't separate from you. It's part of your story, part of your depth, part of what makes you human. The goal isn't to return to some pristine version of yourself that existed before the wound. That person is gone. The goal is to become someone who carries the wound with wisdom instead of shame. Integration doesn't mean the pain disappears. It means the pain stops controlling you. In Jungian psychology, this is the essence of shadow work. You don't destroy the shadow, you integrate it. Every rejected part of yourself, every painful experience you've tried to forget, every emotion you've labeled as bad, they all want the same thing. They want to come home. They want to be part of the whole. Think about it practically. If you've spent your life suppressing anger because you were taught it was unacceptable, that anger doesn't vanish. It leaks out in passive aggression, in resentment, in sudden explosions that surprise even you. But when you integrate it, when you acknowledge that anger is a valid response to being hurt, to being violated, to being unseen, it transforms. It becomes boundary setting. It becomes self-respect. It becomes power. That's not elimination. That's alchemy. Let's talk about what integration actually looks like in daily life. Imagine you carry childhood trauma around abandonment. For years, it showed up as clinginess in relationships, as jealousy, as constant anxiety that people would leave. You tried to fix it by reading self-help books, by forcing yourself to be more independent, by pretending you didn't care. None of it worked because you were trying to erase the wound instead of understanding it. Integration means you finally see the wound clearly. I learned early that love wasn't reliable. That shaped how I attached to people. And instead of hating yourself for it, you hold it with compassion. You recognize the pattern when it arises. You communicate it to your partner. I'm feeling anxious right now. And it's not about you, it's about something old. That's integration. The pain is still there, but it's no longer running the show. Buddhism teaches that enlightenment through pain isn't about transcending suffering, it's about seeing through it. You stop identifying with the pain as the totality of who you are. Yes, you were hurt. Yes, you carry scars. But you are not only your wounds. You are also your resilience, your capacity to feel deeply, your ability to transform suffering into wisdom. This is spiritual transformation in its truest sense. Not becoming someone new, but becoming more fully yourself. Samsara and nirvana aren't two different places. They're two ways of relating to the same reality. Samsara is when you're trapped in the story of your pain. Nirvana is when you're free within it. The circumstances don't change. Your relationship to them does. And here's the profound part. Once you integrate the pain, it becomes your greatest asset. The wound that almost broke you becomes the source of your empathy. The darkness you navigated becomes the light you offer others. This isn't toxic positivity. It's not about pretending the pain was worth it or that everything happens for a reason. It's about recognizing that you can't undo what happened, but you can choose what it makes of you. Karma and rebirth, in the psychological sense, mean you're no longer doomed to repeat the same patterns. You break the cycle by integrating the lesson. The pain doesn't want to disappear because it carries medicine you need not just for yourself, but for everyone you'll meet who's walking through their own darkness. Integration is how suffering becomes service. It's how your wound becomes your wisdom, and it's how you finally stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can I do with what I've learned?" There's a difference between knowing something and living it. You can understand intellectually that your pain has shaped you. You can recognize the patterns, name the triggers, even explain your trauma to others with clarity. But embodied wisdom is something else entirely. It's when the lesson moves from your head into your bones. It's when you don't just know you've healed, you feel it in how you move through the world. Your responses change. Your presence changes. The things that used to destabilize you now pass through you like wind through an open window. This is where spiritual transformation becomes tangible. The wound hasn't disappeared, but it's no longer a wound, it's wisdom you carry in your body, your choices, your way of being. In Eastern philosophy, particularly in Bushido, the way of the warrior, there's this understanding that true strength comes from having been broken and rebuilt. The samurai didn't fear scars. They honored them. Each scar was proof of a battle survived, a lesson earned. Your emotional scars are no different. When you transform the wound into embodied wisdom, you stop hiding your history. You stop pretending you weren't hurt. Instead, you own it. You let it inform how you show up, not as bitterness, not as defensiveness, but as depth. People feel it when they're around you. There's a groundedness, a realness, an absence of pretense. You've been to the underworld and returned. That journey shows in everything you do. Let's get specific about what this looks like. Say you grew up in a household where emotions were punished or ignored. You learned to suppress what you felt, to stay small, to never ask for too much. That wound shaped decades of your life, difficulty expressing needs, fear of conflict, chronic people-pleasing. But through the process of shadow work, through feeling and integrating, something shifts. Now, when tension arises in a relationship, you don't shut down. You pause. You notice the old pattern trying to activate. And instead of following it, you speak, "I need to tell you how I'm feeling." That's embodied wisdom. It's not theory. It's not affirmation. It's your nervous system learning a new response. The mind-body connection rewires itself through repeated practice, through choosing presence over protection. Buddhism speaks of enlightenment not as a destination but as a way of walking. You don't arrive at healed. You practice it daily. Some days you'll stumble. Old wounds will flare up. You'll react in ways you thought you'd moved past. And that's okay. That's human. Embodied wisdom doesn't mean perfection. It means awareness. It means catching yourself mid-pattern and course-correcting. It means apologizing when you fall back into old defenses. It means recognizing impermanence even in your own growth. You're not fixed. You're fluid. And that fluidity is your power. Wu Wei teaches that the strongest trees bend in the storm. They don't break because they don't resist. You've learned to bend. The wound taught you how. And here's where it becomes beautiful. The wisdom doesn't just serve you, it serves everyone you encounter. Think about the people who've impacted your life most deeply. Chances are, they weren't the ones who had it all figured out. They were the ones who'd been through something and came out the other side with their hearts still open. That's what embodied wisdom does. It makes you safe for others to be real around. It makes you someone who doesn't flinch when people share their darkness because you've sat with your own. This is where suffering and awakening complete the circle. The pain that isolated you now connects you. The wound that felt like a curse becomes the bridge to deeper intimacy, deeper purpose, deeper life. You're not performing healing anymore. You're living from it. And living from it means the lesson has moved beyond insight. It's become who you are. There's a version of you that existed in the worst moments. The you who was drowning. The you who couldn't see a way forward. The you who made decisions out of survival, not clarity. And now, from this side of healing, it's tempting to judge that person. To cringe at how you coped, how you clung, how you hurt yourself or others because you didn't know better. But reconciliation asks something harder. Can you look back at who you were with compassion instead of shame? Can you see that person fragile, desperate, doing the best they could with what they had and honor them? Because without that reconciliation, the healing is incomplete. You carry a fracture inside, the split between who you were and who you've become. Integration means bringing them back together. In Jungian psychology, this is part of shadow work, not just integrating the dark emotions, but integrating the past self you've disowned. That version of you wasn't weak. They were wounded. There's a difference. They survived something that could have destroyed them. Maybe they survived it messily. Maybe they hurt people in the process. Maybe they made choices they regret, but they survived. And the fact that you're here now, reading this, feeling this, means they succeeded. Eastern philosophy teaches non-attachment, but sometimes we're most attached to our own self-judgment. We cling to the story that we should have known better, should have been stronger, should have healed faster. That story is another cage. Reconciliation is the key that opens it. Let's make this real. Think about a time when you were at your lowest. Maybe you stayed in a toxic relationship too long. Maybe you numbed out with substances. Maybe you pushed away everyone who tried to help. When you think about that time now, what do you feel? Embarrassment? Anger at yourself? A desperate wish to erase it? That's the split. But what if, instead, you could look at that version of you and say, you were in so much pain. You didn't have the tools you have now. You were trying to survive the only way you knew how. I see you. I forgive you. That's not excusing harm. That's not bypassing accountability. That's recognizing the psychology of pain that people in crisis don't make clear decisions. They make survival decisions, and survival is messy. Buddhism speaks of karma not as cosmic punishment, but as the natural consequence of action. You can't undo what you did, but you can break the cycle of self-punishment. You can recognize that the person you were then and the person you are now exist on the same continuum. They're not enemies. One became the other through suffering and awakening. This is where self-awareness deepens into self-compassion. You stop treating your past self like a stranger you're ashamed to know. You bring them into the present with tenderness. You say, I understand now why you did what you did, and I'm here now to take care of us differently. That internal reconciliation changes everything. It ends the war inside you. And here's the profound truth. You can't truly move forward while dragging a version of yourself you despise. That younger you, that suffering you, they need to be released, not abandoned, released. Released from your judgment, released from your shame, honored for their survival. In Taoism, they speak of returning to simplicity, to wholeness. Reconciliation is that return. You gather all the scattered pieces of who you've been and you say, you all belong here. You're all part of the story. And suddenly, you're not fragmented anymore. You're whole not because you erased the painful parts, but because you made peace with them. The wound becomes integrated not just intellectually, but relationally. You've reconciled with yourself. And that reconciliation is the foundation for every authentic connection you'll build from here forward. Because you can't offer others what you haven't given yourself, the grace to have been human, to have suffered, and to have survived imperfectly. So here you are, not at the end, but at a turning point. Because healing isn't something you finish, it's something you live. It's the daily choice to feel instead of numb, to witness instead of resist, to integrate instead of erase. The pain you've carried wasn't meaningless. It shaped you. It deepened you. It cracked you open so something truer could emerge. And now the question isn't whether you'll forget what hurt you, it's whether you'll let it teach you. You've seen that the ego fights, that pain returns as a teacher, that collapse is an invitation, and that integration transforms suffering into wisdom. But knowing isn't enough. Living it is what changes everything. So ask yourself, what part of your pain are you still resisting? What version of yourself are you still refusing to reconcile with? And what would happen if you stopped treating your wound like something to hide and started treating it like something sacred? This is a threshold. You can walk back into the noise, back into the distractions, back into the patterns that kept you safe but small. Or you can stay here in the discomfort and the honesty and the transformation. The choice has always been yours. If this stirred something in you, something you can't quite name but can definitely feel, then you're already walking the path. There are deeper layers to explore, harder truths to embrace, and more wisdom waiting in the silence you've been avoiding. Keep walking. The next lesson awaits you.